is that?
This is Brian with ScreenFiles.com and review. What I'm looking at today is 2019's Sea Fever, directed by Neasa Hardiman. When I first heard about this movie, I thought the title was frankly terrible, and I asked myself, what is sea fever? Well, according to the movie, sea fever is when people on ships essentially lose their minds. When people are isolated and lack sleep, they potentially go crazy when they're at sea for extended periods of time. This is sea fever, and the movie being titled that is a little deceptive, if only because while the term is used in the movie, it's not quite fitting, and it doesn't really tell you what the movie is about. And not only does the title not tell you what the movie is about, the poster doesn't tell you what the movie is about. Something similar to The Abyss in terms of its design. And it's very deceptive because while it does hold things in common with movies like The Abyss, though I put it more in the ballpark of Deep Star 6, maybe even a little of Leviathan than The Abyss, it's a deceptive poster, and it's a deceptive name. And I don't mean necessarily that the producers meant to deceive people. I mean deceptive in the sense that they don't give you a very good impression of what this movie's about at all, beyond the obvious, the sea. And I think that it does this movie a disservice because people that might be very interested in this type of film may not see it because of the title or its poster. Sea Fever also begins with a voiceover at the very beginning. And it's really odd, mainly because it shouldn't be there. It doesn't add anything to the movie, and it actually distracts from the movie. Like I said earlier, the title is problematic, the poster is problematic, and then you have a voiceover that doesn't need to be there, that doesn't clarify things, and it's just kind of irritating. This is not a good start for this movie, which is a pity because it's a really good movie. More than anything else, Sea Fever is a story of this scientist named Siobhan. And she's still in school, and she's assigned to go on this fishing trawler to analyze what they're doing, take a look at the catch, and dive, and that type of thing for her studies. And it's important to notice that Siobhan doesn't like people. She's not a misanthrope by any stretch of the imagination, but she is very much into her work. That's all she really cares about. She doesn't particularly care about relationships. She is very much an introvert, and she is very reluctant to go on this fishing trawler because it's not that necessarily she doesn't want to do it, more so than that it's a distraction from her work. Well, at least she thinks it's a distraction from her work, so it does not interest her at all. But her professor makes it abundantly clear that if she doesn't go on this trip, he's going to fail her. So she goes. She gets on the trawler, and she is very isolated from the crew. And that's because of her own nature. They're actually very friendly people. So eventually she begins to open up to them. And she has what can only be called hints of something. There's a word I'm looking for. It's eluding me at the moment. She keeps getting these glimpses of her falling into the water. You don't quite know what to make of them, but as I said, I think it's almost her seeing her fate. And it's interesting because she doesn't change anything. She seems generally scared of these visions, for lack of a better term, but she continues on. And then eventually the fishing vessel goes into areas of the sea where the Coast Guard said they weren't supposed to go. Now this is interesting because it implies a conspiracy. Now I'm not saying there is, but it implies it because this area of the ocean was cordoned off to fishing. The captain of the trawler disobeyed it. But the question is, I should mention there's a creature in this movie, by the way. And this creature happens to be in the area cordoned off, i.e. the conspiracy. And it's interesting. This is something that the movie doesn't really explain or play up. But the reason given for vessels being kept away from this part of the sea is because of whale migrations or something like that. And that's possible, but that you had this creature there as well in the center of it seems kind of weirdly coincidental. So that's an odd thing the movie doesn't quite explore, and that's a pity because it's a pretty interesting angle. In any case, this creature is like nothing they've seen before, and apparently he mistakes the boat for a whale, which this creature would use to create more of itself. In other words, what it would do is it has these tentacles, these pseudopods, and it would attach to the whale and inject its spawn essentially into the whale, which I assume they would just devour from the inside out. But seeing that the boat isn't a whale, it ejects itself into the hull, and its pseudopods have this ability to break down wood. So they actually manage to enter the boat itself. Now the larvae of this creature are on the ship, and they are in this kind of green gel, and so one of the members of the crew is injured, and so the larvae enter his body through his injury to, let's say, eye-popping results. So the rest of the movie is Siobhan working to ensure that no one leaves the ship. It's very evocative of John Carpenter's The Thing in this way. But what makes it its own animal, pardon the pun, it's that Siobhan is less concerned for her own welfare than stopping these things from reaching the mainland. At the time this is happening, the trawler is getting closer and closer to land. And towards the end of the movie, I believe there's something like 30 hours out. So she has to stop them from reaching land because based upon her observations, it takes something in the ballpark of 36 hours for these creatures to show themselves in a host. So she's worried about these things spreading exponentially from the members of the crew. And that's a very real possibility. Heck, by way of example, look at coronavirus. That probably worked on a similar principle. Namely, a few people got it, spread it to other people, and before you know it, you have a worldwide viral plague. It would work the same way with the larva of this creature. So she stops the boat. She sabotages it so that they can't go anywhere. Also very similar to the Thing. And Sea Fever is pretty good. It's an interesting movie. It's a very thoughtful movie, which is very typical of Irish horror. And it's well worth catching. Though I wish, as I said earlier, that the title were different, that the poster were different, because they give you no idea how rich and interesting this movie actually is. Do you agree? Disagree? Let me know down below. And since you're there anyway, please consider a like or a follow. Peace.